Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome. Today's topic is the 1920 Cleveland Indians, World Series champions. We won the World Series, yay! To quote the song by Queen, I think. We were the champions, my friend. Again, the Tribe was playing in the American League, and they were playing home games at Dunn Field, also known as League Park. They finished in first place with a record of 98-56, winning percentage of .636. The second place team was the Chicago White Sox, who were 96-58, 2 games out of first. Third place, the New York Yankees, 95-59. Fourth place, the St. Louis Browns, 76-77. Fifth place, the Boston Red Sox, 72-81. Sixth place, the Washington Senators, 68-84. Seventh place, the Detroit Tigers, 61-93. And in eighth and last place, the Philadelphia Athletics, 48-106, 50 games out of first. So under the format back in the day, if you finished in first, you went directly to the World Series. So that was pretty cool. And in the 1920 World Series, the Indians, the American League champions, defeated the Brooklyn Robins, the National League champions, 5-2. Brooklyn Robins were named after their manager, Wilbert Robinson. Now, during the season, Cleveland battled the Chicago White Sox and the Babe Ruth-led New York Yankees for the American League pennant, basically a 3-team race. Cleveland shortstop Ray Chapman died at age 29. He was hit by a pitch on August 16th in New York City. Very tragic. And they overcame that. Very tragic for the team and his family. The only Major League Baseball player to die playing baseball, although some minor league players have died being hit by a pitch. In Game 5 of the World Series at Dunn Field, one of the greatest games of all time, Bill Wamsgans, the Cleveland second baseman, had the only unassisted triple play in World Series history. Elmer Smith of Cleveland hit the first World Series grand slam, and Jim Bagby of Cleveland was the first pitcher to hit a World Series home run. During the regular season, the Tribe led Major League Baseball in runs scored with 857, and that broke the club record of 691. The team batting average was .303, really something. Late in the season, the Chicago Black Sox scandal broke. On September 28th, 8 members of the 1919 White Sox were indicted by a grand jury and suspended by the team. In the World Series, Brooklyn had star players Zach Wheat, Burley Grimes, and Rube Marquard. The Tribe's share of the World Series for each player was $4,168 per player. During the season, Babe Ruth hit 54 home runs and broke his own record of the previous year. He shattered it. His record had been 29 in 1919. In November, Warren Harding of Marion, Ohio, was elected U.S. President. Now, the Tribe was down in the World Series 2-1 after 3 games in Brooklyn, and they won the next 4 in Cleveland. It was a best-of-9 series. At Public Square, there was an 18-by-24-foot scoreboard, and the play-by-play action was displayed for the fans. Remember, there was no television and radio. Cleveland celebrated for a week after winning the World Series. There was a party at Wade Park on the east side, just near the Art Museum. 50,000 fans came to that. League Park had a record Cleveland crowd of 29,266 on June 13th. And Cleveland beat the Yankees 14-0, or were defeated by the Yankees 14-0 in that game. I'm reading read a fine book called The Pitch That Killed, the story of Carl Mays, Ray Chapman, and the pennant race of 1920 by Mike Sewell, 1989. Spring training for the Tribe in 1920 was in New Orleans. Now back to that Wade Park World Series victory celebration, the band played Hail, Hail, the Gang's All Here, and the new baseball anthem, Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Cleveland sports writer Henry Edwards wrote, quote, "The better the day, the better the deed. On October 12, 1492, Christopher Columbus discovered America and thus paved the way for the organization of the American Baseball League. On October 20th, 1920, the Cleveland Indians, no relations to those discovered by Columbus 428 years ago, won the World's Baseball Championship. Columbus Day from now on shall be a Cleveland civic holiday. For the 1920 season, there was a new tribe fan club called Stick to the Finish, and they vowed to support the tribe to the end of the season regardless of the standings. Their motto was glue, 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 indicating that they would stick to the team to the end. For the World Series, the tribe had its sparkling new blue uniforms with black socks and a black armband to honor their fallen comrade, Ray Chapman. Baseball historian Scott Longert wrote, quote, "The players had not forgotten their pal, Ray Chapman." As I said, the first 3 games were in Brooklyn. The tribe was down 2-1. They won the next 4 at League Park. And if they had, otherwise they would have had to go back to Brooklyn. But they ended it here in Cleveland. For the World Series, the Tribe players stayed at the Hollenden Hotel in Cleveland. Fans were waiting in line to buy tickets for Game 5, and a World War I veteran said this, quote, "Remember the Argonne? Well, this is a joy compared to that. All we have to do is wait, not for the 0 hour, but for the gates to open. Say, ain't it a pipe?" Brooklyn pitcher Rube Marquardt was arrested for scalping tickets. He tried to get $350 for 4 box seats for the World Series and was released before Game 5. Cy Young appeared at Game 5. After Game 5, the Cleveland newspaper reported, quote, "Wow, Cleveland is in a frenzy. The old town is skipping about like a cold in springtime. Will Cleveland win? What a question. Will the sun rise? Will a Bolshevik dodge soap?" Game 7 temperature, that was the clincher, was 72 degrees. After Game 7, Tribe owner Jim Dunn spoke to the crowd and said, quote, "I am the happiest man in the world today. I know you are happy too. After all, it is more your team. It is Cleveland's team more than it is mine. I thank you for your enthusiasm and for your loyalty." Scott H. Longert wrote that the 1920 Cleveland Indians could always hold their heads high. They were the ones who broke the string and brought to life an entire city in the most unforgettable summer in Cleveland baseball history. For the season, the home attendance in 1920 was 912,832, an average of 11,855 fans per game. The previous total attendance record was 541,000 in 1913, so they shattered the attendance record. At the end Cleveland had 20. What it meant is Cleveland ended their 25-year MLB title drought going back to 1895 when the Cleveland Spiders were champions of baseball. Now the coach again in 1920 was Jack McAllister. He was the new coach, although he'd been with the team for a while. McAllister was born in 1879. He died in 1946 at age 67. He was a native of Marietta, Ohio. In 1902, he played in the minors for the Hartford Senators in the Connecticut League. He hoped to play for the St. Louis Cardinals, but a knee injury ended his playing career. In 1905, McAllister was an umpire. He also was a manager for the Portsmouth Cobblers in the Ohio State League in 1909. By 1913, he had been hired by the Tribe as a coach and scout. He was Tris Speaker's primary assistant between 1919 and 1926. He was the Tribe manager midway through 1926 to the end of the year and in 1927. He also was a scout for the Detroit Tigers, Boston Red Sox, and Cincinnati Reds, and died in Columbus, Ohio. Jack McAllister. Tris Speaker, again, was the Tribe player manager, and he played center field. He had an incredible year. Speaker batted .388, 50 doubles, 11 triples, 8 home runs, 107 RBIs, 10 stolen bases in 150 games. And Speaker was with Cleveland from 1916 to 1926. He was a Tribe manager from 1919 to 1926. After the death of Ray Chapman, the Detroit Tigers and Boston Red Sox players called for Carl Mays, the pitcher who threw the New York Yankee pitcher who threw the ball that led to the death of Ray Chapman. They called for him to be banned from baseball. Tris Speaker responded, quote, "I do not hold Carl Mays responsible in any way. I have been active in discouraging my players from holding Mays responsible, and in respect for Ray Chapman's memory, as well as for the good of baseball, I hope all this kind of talk will stop. I realize that Carl Mays feels this thing as deeply as any man could, and I do not want to add to his burden. I do not know what prompted the actions of the Boston and Detroit players. For my part, I think it was deplorable." Tris Speaker said this, quote, "Ray Chapman was the best friend I ever had. I would give up any hopes for a championship and retire from the game if in doing so I could bring my friend back to life." After the final out of Game 7, when the Tribe clinched the World Series, Tris Speaker got the ball from Bill Wamsgans from the final out and went to owner Jim Dunn's field box, gave him the ball, and then he greeted his mother and said, quote, "We did it, Mother," and he hugged his mother. In a mid-May game at League Park, shoeless Joe Jackson drove a ball to deep center. Speaker caught the ball, ran into the wall, and was knocked unconscious. However, the ball remained in his glove and Jackson was out. On September 1, Speaker said this, quote, "The boys had a tough time of it getting squared away following Ray Chapman's death. It was the hardest battle I ever had in my life to overcome my grief, and all of the boys felt the same way about it. But we realized that all our tears and heartaches couldn't bring dear Ray back, and we just pulled ourselves together with that which was uppermost in Chappie's mind, the pennant and the World Championship, as our goal." Timothy M. Gay, baseball historian, wrote, quote, "No ball player in history was as beloved by a community as Tris Speaker in Cleveland in 1920. He was the alpha and the omega, the miracle worker who overcame tragedy to turn a pedestrian team into a pennant winner." Sports writer Damon Runyon wrote about the 1920 World Series, quote, "Tris Speaker is the greatest outfielder that has ever lived. You have to go to the animal kingdom to find similes for further description. He has the speed of a greyhound. He has the eyes like an antelope, which can see very far. His judgment of a fly ball corresponds in keenness to the sense of smell of a deer." Henry Edwards, a sports writer of the Cleveland Plain Dealer, wrote, quote, "Tris Speaker combines the gray matter of a thinking veteran with the effervescence of a college boy. He is the carefree rookie one moment, the critical manager the next. He is the happy-go-lucky practical joker one moment, the stern disciplinarian the next." After the last out of the 1920 World Series at League Park, Speaker ran from center field to his mother's seat behind home plate and kissed and hugged her. Fred Charles of the Plain Dealer wrote, quote, "The embrace and the kiss awed the crowd into a moment of silence, and then a cheer went up. All over the stands, women were standing on tiptoe, leaning across railings, many of them with glistening eyes. Tris Speaker." Again, our outstanding catcher in 1920 was Steve O'Neill. He had a fine year. He batted .321, 39 doubles, 5 triples, 3 home runs, 55 RBIs, 3 stolen bases in 149 games. O'Neill was with Cleveland from 1911 to 1923, and he was the manager of the Indians from 1935 to 1937. His best friend was boxing champion Johnny Kilbane, Steve O'Neill. Doc Johnston was at first base. Johnston had a fine year, hit .292, 24 doubles, 10 triples, 2 home runs, 71 RBIs, 13 stolen bases in 147 games. Johnston was with Cleveland from 1912 to 1914 and 1918 to 1921. In the World Series, his brother Jimmy Johnston played third base for Brooklyn. Johnston was a hitting sensation in the spring and earned a spot high in the batting order. However, he pleaded with Tris Speaker to bat 7th in the order because he said that was his lucky number, and Speaker agreed. Doc Johnston. Bill Wamsgans, again, was our tremendous second baseman. Wamsgans batted .244, 16 doubles, 11 triples, a home run, 55 RBIs, 9 stolen bases in 153 games. Wamsgans was with Cleveland from 1914 to 1923. Now, he got that unassisted triple play The Brooklyn in Game 5 of the World Series, Brooklyn had two base runners. At the time, Pete Kilduff at second and Otto Miller at first. There was a line drive which was caught by Wamby, who doubled Kilduff off second, and then standing on second, and then he tagged Miller, the runner from first, who was coming in, and that made 3 outs. In Game 7, he got at Dunfield or League Park, he got the final out. It was a ground ball to Joe Sewell, who flipped to Wamsgans, and that was the final out and gave Cleveland the World Series championship. He had this to say about the unassisted triple play and the glory of their times. After the second out, he said this, quote, "Well, Otto Miller from first base was just standing there with his mouth open, no more than a few feet away from me. I simply took a step or two over and touched him lightly on the shoulder, and that was it. 3 out. And I started running into the dugout. There was dead silence for a few seconds. Then as I approached the dugout, it began to dawn on the crowd what they had just seen, and the cheering started, and quickly got louder and louder. By the time I got back to the bench, it was bedlam. Straw hats flying onto the field, people yelling themselves hoarse, my teammates pounding me on the back." Bill Wamsgans' favorite poem was this, quote, "Now summer goes and tomorrow's snows will soon be deep, and the sky of blue which summer knew sees shadows creep, and the dreams of youth find the bitter truth of pain and tears. Through the cheering mass let the victors pass to find fate's thrust, as tomorrow's fame writes another name on drifting dust." Bill Wamsgans. Ray Chapman was the Tribe shortstop until his very tragic death in August. He batted .303 with 27 doubles, 8 triples, 3 home runs, 49 RBIs, 13 stolen bases in 111 games. Chapman played for Cleveland from 1912 to 1920. He died August 17, 1920 in New York City, 12 hours after being hit in the head by a pitch from New York Yankees pitcher Carl Mays at the Polo Grounds. He died at St. Lawrence Hospital in New York City of an intracranial hemorrhage. Chapman married Kathleen Daly in the off-season on October 29, 1919. Kathleen was pregnant when Chapman died. He had multiple skull fracture. Kathleen Chapman, his widow, received a full World Series share of $4,168. After being hit by the pitch, blood oozed from his ear. After the Game 5 of the World Series that Cleveland won in dramatic fashion, Tris Speaker biographer Timothy M. Gay wrote, quote, "All the commentary that evening and the next morning centered on the two miraculous events, a grand slam and an unassisted triple play happening in the same game. What were the chances? Everyone in northeastern Ohio was convinced that Ray Chapman was up in heaven, manipulating things with the Almighty." 6 months after Chapman's death, his widow Kathleen gave birth to a girl whom she named Ray, R-A-E. She remarried and moved to California. However, she had struggled with depression over the years and 6 years later committed suicide by ingesting cleaning fluid. In 1928, her daughter and Ray's daughter, Ray, died of measles. The mother and daughter are both buried at the Catholic Cemetery in Cleveland, Calvary. However, Ray is buried at Lakeview Cemetery. The funeral for Ray Chapman was held at St. John's Cathedral on East 9th Street and Superior in downtown Cleveland. Chapman had this to say about Carl Mays earlier, quote, "Carl Mays throws it so he'll dust you off the plate. But I'll stand right up there. He doesn't bother me. He's not going to intimidate me." Before the trip, when he died to New York City, Chapman showed his friend Jack Graney his new home that he and Kathleen had bought. And Graney said, quote, "What are you going to do with all these rooms?" Chapman replied, "Fill them up." And Chapman grinned because he wanted a big family. Carl Mays, the pitcher who threw the fateful pitch, liked to chew on a chicken neck during games to keep his mouth moist. On September 3rd at League Park before the Tribe Tigers game, a lone bugler stood at shortstop position and played taps in honor of Ray Chapman. Fans and players had tears in their eyes, and widow Kathleen Chapman wrote, quote, "To me, the greatest praise that can be given is that he so lived his life as to cause only happiness and smiles. Therefore, let us remember him as he would wish, without tears. Let us think of him with a laugh at the memory of some joy, a smile at all times, and a deep prayer of thanksgiving that it was given us to have known him, to have his memory to lighten the gray days. And let us keep that memory fresh and sweet with a brave heart and a smile, for Chappie loved both." On August 7th, 1921 at League Park, the one-year anniversary of Ray Chapman's death, in the fifth inning, Bill Wamsgans took a ball, and then everyone took off their hats and stood in silence for 1 minute in honor of Ray Chapman. It wasn't until 1958, 38 years later, that batting helmets became mandatory in Major League Baseball. Ray Chapman. Larry Gardner was the Tribe third baseman in 1920. Gardner batted .310, very good. 31 doubles, 11 triples, 3 home runs, 118 RBIs, wow. 3 stolen bases in 154 games. And Gardner was with Cleveland from 1919 to 1924. Larry Gardner. Charlie Jameson was the left fielder. Jameson batted .319 with 17 doubles, 7 triples, a home run, 40 RBIs, 2 stolen bases in 108 games. And Jameson was with Cleveland from 1919 to 1932. Charlie Jameson. Elmer Smith was in right field. Smith batted .316 with 37 doubles, 10 triples, 12 home runs, 103 RBIs, 5 stolen bases in 129 games. And Smith was with Cleveland from 1914 to 1916 and then 1917 to 1921. He had the first Grand Slam in World Series history in Game 5 of the World Series at League Park in the first inning. Elmer Smith. Now on the bench we had Jack Graney was a spare outfielder. Graney batted .296 with 45 hits and 152 at-bats, 11 doubles, a triple, 13 RBIs, 4 stolen bases in 62 games. Graney was with Cleveland starting in 1908 and then 1910 to 1922. He was a Tribe radio broadcaster from 1932 to 1953. Earlier in his career, Graney had accidentally dropped his stockings out of a third-floor hotel window. He called a porter below to throw up the socks. However, they were too light. So he told the fellow to tie the socks around a rock and throw them up, which he did. However, the socks loosened and the rock hit Graney in the mouth, and he had a scar for the rest of your life. And then he said this, quote, "With your control added to my speed, I'd be the greatest pitcher in the world." And as he said this, there was blood pouring from the wound. Jack Graney. Another outfielder was Joe Evans, who batted .349, 60 hits and 172 at-bats, 9 doubles, 9 triples, 23 RBIs, 6 stolen bases in 56 games. And Evans was with Cleveland from 1915 to 1922. Joe Evans. Smokey Joe Wood was another outfielder. Wood batted .270 with 37 hits and 137 at-bats. 11 doubles, 2 triples, a home run, 30 RBIs, a stolen base in 61 games. Did a little pitching. He had no decisions and an ERA of 22.50. 1 game, 2.1 innings pitched, and 5 earned runs allowed. Wood was with Cleveland from 1917 to 1922. On August 20th, 1920, Joe pitched his last Major League Baseball game. Late in the season, he said this, quote, "I slept a real sleep last night for the first time in many a night. When I wasn't lying awake thinking and planning and fighting over the next day's ball game in that furious pennant drive, I was dreaming restless dreams about it." Smokey Joe Wood. Now the guy who became the replacement for Ray Chapman and was in a tough position was Joe Sewell, who batted .329 with 23 hits and 70 at-bats, 4 doubles, a triple, 12 RBIs, a stolen base in 22 games. Sewell was from Titus, Alabama. He died in Mobile, Alabama in 1990 at age 91. For his career, he batted .312. Wow, 2,226 hits, 49 home runs, 1,055 RBIs. Sewell played for Cleveland from 1920 to 1930, and then with the New York Yankees between 1931 and 1933. He won a World Series title with Cleveland in 1920 and with the Yankees in 1932. He's in the Cleveland Indians Hall of Fame, and he was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1977. He has the lowest strikeout rate in MLB history. Sewell struck out one time, an average, every 62 and a half at-bats. He lettered in college football at the University of Alabama. Made his MLB debut after Ray Chapman was killed by a pitch in August. He's known for his patience and daily work ethic. His entire MLB career, he used one bat, which he named Black Betsy. He would rub that bat with a Coke bottle and season it with chewing tobacco. His brothers Luke and Tommy also were MLB players. Luke, 20 years in the major leagues, and then was manager of the St. Louis Browns when they won the 1944 National League title. After Sewell retired, he became a public relations guy for a dairy and also an MLB scout. 1964, at age 66, he became the Alabama baseball coach and coached Ken Stabler, who became an NFL quarterback. After Ray Chapman's death, Sewell was called up from the minors. He'd been playing for the New Orleans Pelicans. And he said this, quote, "I was more frightened than pleased, but as I traveled north, I made up my mind that when I took the field in a Cleveland uniform, I would forget I was Joe Sewell and imagine I was Ray Chapman, fighting to bring honor and glory to Cleveland." Baseball writer Mike Sewell wrote, quote, "Joe Sewell reluctantly boarded a train in New Orleans for Cleveland. He had never been to a major league city before, never even been out of the South, and suddenly he was about to be thrust into the midst of a heated pennant race. Even more staggering to the 21-year-old ball player, it had become the heir to Ray Chapman's legacy. He was overwhelmed by the enormity of the task. After a strong game at batting and in the field, catcher Steve O'Neill smiled at him and said, "Chappie's looking down on you, Joe. He's proud of you." Joe Sewell. Now, Harry Lunte was another shortstop. He actually filled in after the death of Ray Chapman, before Joe Sewell became the regular shortstop. Lunte batted .197 with 14 hits and 71 at-bats. He scored 6 runs, 7 RBIs in 23 games. And Lunte was with Cleveland from 1919 to 1920, so this was the end of his MLB career. As I said, he played shortstop after Ray Chapman's death. However, he had a pulled muscle and was out for the rest of the season. He is known as a good fielder, but a light hitter. Harry Lunte. George Burns played some first base. Burns batted .268 with 15 hits and 56 at-bats, scored 7 runs, 4 doubles, a triple, 13 RBIs, a stolen base in 44 games. Burns was from Niles, Ohio. He died in Kirkland, Washington in 1978 at age 84. His career average was .307 with 2,018 hits, 72 home runs, and 954 RBIs. Burns played for the Detroit Tigers, Philadelphia Athletics, Cleveland Indians, Boston Red Sox, and New York Yankees between 1914 and 1929. He was the American League MVP in 1926 playing for Cleveland. He won 3 World Series titles with the 1920 Tribe, the 1928 Yankees, and the 1929 Philadelphia A's. They called him Tioga George. After he retired, he played in the minors and was a manager in the minors until 1939. Later, he became deputy sheriff in Seattle, Washington area, and retired from that in 1967. George Burns. Les Nunemaker was a utility player. Nunemaker batted .333 with 18 hits and 54 at-bats, scored 10 runs, 3 doubles, 3 triples, 14 RBIs, a stolen base in 34 games. Nunemaker played for Cleveland from 1919 to 1922. Before Game 6 of the World Series, Nunemaker found $16 under his pillow. He panicked and thought he was being bribed, similar to the 1919 Black Sox scandal, and reported the incident to American League President Ban Johnson. Later, he noticed that they were Confederate dollars. Les Nunemaker. Pinch Thomas was a spare catcher. Thomas batted .333, 3 hits and 9 at-bats, scored 2 runs, had a double in 9 games, and Thomas was with Cleveland from 1918 to 1921. Pinch Thomas. Now the pitching staff was led by Jim Bagby, the ace pitcher. Bagby batted .252 with 33 hits and 131 at-bats, 7 doubles, 3 triples, a home run, 14 RBIs in 49 games. Bagby's pitching record was 31-12. Wow, he won 31 games, an ERA of 2.89, 48 games, 38 starts, 30 complete games, and 3 shutouts. And Bagby was with Cleveland from 1916 to 1922. Jim Bagby. Stan Coveleski was another outstanding starting pitcher. Coveleski batted .225 with 25 hits and 111 at-bats, 4 doubles, 2 triples, 17 RBIs in 41 games. Pitching record was 24-14 with an ERA of 2.49, 41 games, 38 starts, 26 complete games, 3 shutouts, and 2 saves. Coveleski was with Cleveland from 1916 to 1924. He won 3 games in the 1920 World Series. 2 were shutouts. And his ERA in the World Series was 0.67. So he was one of the real heroes of the 1920 World Series. On May 28th, Coveleski received a telegram that his wife had died at their home in Shamokin, Pennsylvania. So he was pitching in the World Series and also grieving for his loss for his wife who had died. Stan Coveleski. Ray Caldwell was another outstanding starting pitcher. Caldwell batted .213 with 19 hits and 89 at-bats, 3 doubles, 7 RBIs in 41 games. Caldwell's pitching record was 20-10 with an ERA of 3.86, 34 games, 33 starts, 20 complete games, and a shutout. And Caldwell was with Cleveland from 1919 to 1921. Now, the famous game in 1919 when Caldwell got hit by lightning on the mound, it was believed that the lightning hit the metal button on top of his cap, surged through his body, and exited his metal spikes, leaving him with a slight burn on the chest. And then so this was with 2 outs in the 9th inning, and then he got the final out and won the game after being unconscious for 5 minutes. Ray Caldwell. Guy Morton was another pitcher. Morton batted .217 with 10 hits and 46 at-bats, scored a run, 2 RBIs in 29 games. Morton's pitching record was 8-6 with an ERA of 4.47, 29 games, 17 starts, 6 complete games, a shutout, and 3 saves. And Morton was with Cleveland from 1914 to 1924. Guy Morton. George Ewell was another pitcher. Ewell batted .344, 11 hits and 32 at-bats, scored 4 runs, 2 RBIs, a stolen base in 27 games. Ewell's pitching record was 4-5 with an ERA of 5.21, 27 games, 6 starts, 2 complete games, and a save. And Ewell was with Cleveland from 1919 to 1928, and then again in 1936. George Ewell. Elmer Myers was another pitcher. Myers batted .240 with 6 hits and 25 at-bats, scored 2 runs, 2 doubles, 4 RBIs in 16 games. Myers' pitching record was 2-4 with an ERA of 4.77, 16 games, 7 starts, 2 complete games, and a save. And Myers was with Cleveland from 1919 to 1920. And so this was the end of his time in Cleveland. He continued in the major leagues until 1922. Elmer Myers. Duster Mayles was another pitcher who made a big contribution. Mayles batted .200 with 4 hits and 20 at-bats, scored 3 runs, had a double in 9 games. Mayles' pitching record was 7-0 with an ERA of 1.85. 9 games, 8 starts, 6 complete games, and 2 shutouts. Mayles was from San Quentin, California. He died in San Francisco, California in 1974 at age 79. Career record of 32-25 with an ERA of 4.10 and 232 strikeouts. Mayles pitched for the Brooklyn Robins, Cleveland Indians, and St. Louis Cardinals between 1915 and 1926. In Game 6 of the 1920 World Series, Mayles pitched a complete game and won that game 1-0, a shutout. So he was a World Series hero. In the minor leagues, he won 200 games, mostly in the Pacific Coast League, with a record of 226 and 210, pitching for the Portland Beavers, Oakland Oaks, and San Francisco Seals. He came to the Tribe in August from the Pacific Coast League, and he called himself the Great One. He was a very valuable addition. And it was a big late-season victory against the White Sox. The Males pitched. He was given the best pick of suits available at the B.R. Baker clothing store in Cleveland. He was a native of San Quentin, California, and used to go inside the prison to play baseball games against a convict team. And he said, quote, "It must be rough in one of those big prisons, and a baseball game is about the best thing they have. They would put a pretty tolerable team on the field, too, all things considered, although we usually had no trouble in defeating them." Now, there was a ladies' game that was played. A group of women called to him and said, "Yoo-hoo, Walter." And Male's response was, "Why don't you girls go home and wash the dirty dishes you left in the sink? And another thing, stop feeding your husbands from tin cans." Duster Males. Bob Clark was another pitcher. Clark batted .200, 2 hits and 10 at-bats in 11 games. Clark's pitching record was 1-2 with an ERA of 3.43, 11 games, 2 starts, both complete games, and a shutout. Clark was from Newport, Pennsylvania. He died in Carlsbad, New Mexico in 1944 at age 46. Career record of 1-2 with an ERA of 5.44 and 10 strikeouts. And Clark pitched for the Cleveland Indians in 1920 and 1921. In the minor leagues, he pitched for the Susquehanna Riverhawks. Bob Clark. Dick Niehaus was another pitcher. Niehaus batted .444, 4 hits and 9 at-bats in 19 games. Niehaus' pitching record was 1-2 with an ERA of 3.60, 19 games, 3 starts, and 2 saves. Niehaus was from Covington, Kentucky. He died in Atlanta, Georgia in 1957 at age 64. Career record of 4-5 with an ERA of 3.77 and 43 strikeouts. Niehaus pitched for the St. Louis Cardinals from 1913 to 1915 and the Cleveland Indians in 1920. In the minor leagues, he pitched for the Reading Aces, the Atlanta Crackers, the Birmingham Barons, and the Macon Peaches. Dick Niehaus. Tony Faith was another pitcher. Faith batted 5 times, did not have a hit, scored a run, walked once, struck out once in 13 games. As a pitcher, he had no decisions and an ERA of 4.32 in 13 games and 25 innings pitched. Faith was with Cleveland from 1919 to 1920. This was the end of his MLB career. However, he continued in the minor leagues until 1927. Tony Faith. Joe Bowling was another pitcher. Bowling batted .500 with 2 hits and 4 at-bats in 3 games. His pitching record was 0-1 with an ERA of 4.85, 3 games, 2 starts, and 13 innings pitched. Bowling was with Cleveland from 1916 to 1917 and then in 1920. This was the end of his MLB career. Joe Bowling. Tim Murchison was another pitcher. Murchison batted once, did not have a hit. He struck out and he played in 2 games. He had no decisions and an ERA of 0.00 in those 2 games, 5 innings pitched. Murchison was from Liberty, North Carolina. He died in Liberty in 1962 at age 66. His MLB career was just 3 games and 6 innings pitched. He pitched for the St. Louis Cardinals in 1917 and the Cleveland Indians in 1920. Tim Murchison. And finally, George Ellison was another pitcher. He got in 1 game, did not bat, had no decisions, and an ERA of 0.00 in 1 game. 1 innings pitched. He got a strikeout and walked 2 batters. Ellison was from San Francisco, California. He died in San Francisco in 1978 at age 80. But he pitched for the Cleveland Indians in 1920, so this was his brief cup of coffee in the majors, and he pitched in the minor leagues for the California Golden Bears. And after the season, as we said, the Brooklyn Robins, who were the National League champions, were defeated by the Cleveland Indians 5-2. They were named after their manager, Wilbert Robinson, and star players included Rube Marquardt and Zach Wheat. Cleveland star players included Tris Speaker, Joe Sewell, and Stan Kovaleski. The Brooklyn team was renamed the Dodgers in 1932 and moved to Los Angeles after the 1957 season. So that's the story of the 1920 Cleveland Indians, World Series champions. Wow, 99 years ago, or 98 years ago, really something to be proud of. God bless all the fellows who played for the Cleveland Indians in 1920 and everyone else associated with the team, including the fans, especially the Civil War veterans, Spanish-American War veterans, and the First World War veterans. Captains of the Cuyahoga, lovers of Lake Erie, Terminal Tower Power, fans of the Free Stamp Statue and the Fountain of Eternal Life, Severance Hall stalwarts, First Energy Stadium friends, Progressive Field pals, Quicken Loans Arena enthusiasts, Euclid Avenue electricity, Tribe, Browns, Cavs, Monsters, and Gladiators rule. Cleveland, City of Champions. Cleveland is the best location in the nation on the north coast of America. New York is the Big Apple. Cleveland is a plum. Before you know it, it'll be opening day 2019. Go Tribe. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.